Okay, I see people joining. Well, welcome. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast of the US. Good morning, maybe for or I don't know if good afternoon for anyone, but good morning for those of you maybe farther afield. It's great to see you. I'm Bruce Delmonico. I'm Assistant Dean for Admissions here at the Yale School of Management. It's great to have you for this alumni panel. And we're thrilled that you're interested in Yale SOM and you're eager to learn more about our school and our community. So what we have today, we have 4 of our recent alumni who've graciously agreed to join us to share a little bit about their experiences at Yale SOM and beyond. And the format for tonight is pretty open. I have some questions to ask them just to get things going, but then we welcome any questions you all have for the panelists. My colleague Diana Sellers is working behind the scenes to manage the incoming questions, and we will take those and try to get to as many as possible. And so we certainly welcome. You can use the Q&A feature here in Zoom, and we will, as I said, try to ask as many questions of the panelists as possible. Before we get going, I would love it if the panelists, if you all could introduce yourselves. Katarina, if you'd be willing to start, since you're in my upper left, I'm sorry you drew the short straw, but please, if you could just give a sense of your SOM year is there, but what we're doing pre-SOM, maybe your experiences during your time at SOM clubs or other activities, and then what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Bruce. Welcome, guys. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Katarina. I'm from Brazil. So before SOM, I was doing consulting in a small firm, which was focused in the infrastructure sector here in Brazil. And just before SOM, I did a fellowship in Mozambique. So during my time at SOM, I focused a lot on social impact and did all my classes, all the electives in like economics, public policy, and nonprofit management, and nonprofit strategy. So if anyone has specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer. During my internship, I worked at Ashoka for the summer. And after I graduated, I worked for 1 year at a nonprofit consulting firm in Boston called Wellspring Consulting. It was a great experience, but then I left after 1 year because of visa. I'm also happy to talk about that if anyone has any questions. And I joined McKinsey as an associate for the public and social sector practice. And I've been there for almost 2 years now, just became a manager, still in the practice. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these topics.
Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful, and congratulations on making manager. That's fantastic.
Thanks.
Emery, Emery, would you be willing to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. Hey, everyone. My name is Emery Chillum. I am SOM 15. Before my MBA, I was living in West Africa, working in international development. Before that, in the Middle East. At SOM, my internship was at Johnson & Johnson, and post MBA, I joined Apple in their supply chain organization. Was there for a few years, and then still within supply chain, pivoted to the environmental space, and now a program lead on their circular economy work. So excited to deliver recycled content to all the iPhones that I hope many of you are holding in your pocket right now.
Thank you so much, Emery. Bernie, if you want to go next, I know you're Emery's neighbor out on the West Coast. So if you're willing to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, depending where you are in the world. Bernie Loridan, originally from the East Coast, but currently living also in the Bay Area, California. Prior to SOM, my background was mostly financial services. So I started my career in the insurance industry specifically, but I also had some public sector education experience, did some work in the K-12 charter school space. So very, public-private sector background, which obviously led me to naturally the SOM. During my time at SOM, I interned at Bain & Company, which I believe where Amanda is now. And I worked there after business school for about 3 years. So I left as a manager from our San Francisco office. Did a lot of work in technology, but also got to work in our social sector practice and did some work in education, pro bono, and a little bit of paid work as well. And I left Bain about 1.5 years ago, and I joined an ed tech startup. Our name is Bloom Tech. We actually just rebranded. We were called Lambda School, but we teach data science, software engineering online. So it's kind of a boot camp, and I work in business and finance. I lead our biz ops and finance teams here. So happy to speak about all things, both consulting, post-consulting, SOM, pre-SOM. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Bernie. And Amanda, if you'd be willing to bring it on home, and Bernie gave you a little teaser for your trajectory there.
Yes, that's right. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Hathaway. Before SOM, I worked at Bain & Company in our Texas system for 4 years, and then chose to go to SOM in large part because of the social impact classes. I was very much like Katarina and took advantage of all of that at school. Also was very involved in student government. I served as the Red Cohort Rep and the internship fund. So happy to talk about club involvement. I graduated in May 2020, so I had a little bit of COVID business school experience, and I'm happy to talk about that. I returned to Bain now in our Seattle office. I'm a manager in our Seattle office, primarily doing supply chain operations and sustainability work. So there's a lot of overlap for these panelists. And I forgot to mention this, but my internship at school, I did several internships in startups that focused on freight and logistics and technology.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And again, thank you all for participating in today's panel and sharing your thoughts and insights. I do want to try to get to as many questions as we can. So don't, unless I say otherwise, don't feel as though you all have to answer every question. Try and make sure we get to, as I said, as many as possible. But I'd love to actually start with, not specific to SOM, but just more generally, what, for those people who are attending the session, what really was the impetus behind your decision to get an MBA more generally?
I can start. So I was actually on my journey to graduate school, applied to, I think, an MPP, an MPA, and MBA. I was really sort of undecided originally. And I remember speaking with a leader in my previous company in international development, and he sort of pushed me to MBA because he said, think of the world of things that you can do with an MBA versus an MPP versus an MPA. And he was basically like, is there really any job that you would get with an MPA or an MPP that maybe you wouldn't get with an MBA? And then flip that question, how many jobs could you get with an MBA but not an MPP and not an MPA? And I think that sort of the breadth of opportunities that the MBA affords was really key. But then again, plug for SOM, I was obviously interested in a less traditional, strictly MBA, business school world, and SOM was that perfect mix, and Yale was that perfect mix, having access to a much broader experience in graduate school.
That's great. Thank you. And sorry, Amanda.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was very lucky that a lot of people that I worked with had MBAs. And so I heard a lot about different people's experiences choosing to get an MBA. And for me, I was really interested in particular to take a step back in my career and think about where I wanted to go in the near term, but also in the long term with my career. For me, I very much hope to have a second career in social impact and in education. And so I was similar to Emery of trying to decide, do I want to go get a graduate education in higher education or choose to go get a PhD or something? And for me, something that really stuck out was just the flexibility that an MBA gives you, and also the ability to have a common language around business, regardless of the sector that I was in. And so that was something that was really powerful for me. And I think similar to Emery and probably everyone else on the panel, SOM really stuck out because I was able to get all of those other elements around social impact and education and some of the things that I was interested in and passionate about, while also getting an MBA.
Great, thank you so much. And you kind of, I think you all anticipated in your introductions in those two answers. My next question was why, beyond the MBA generally, why SOM in particular? What appealed to you about Yale? And if there are other thoughts on that front, I welcome them. Although you all think I touched on that to some degree in your previous responses.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I can just hop in here. I think for sure, some common themes. Of course, when I was like evaluating different business schools, trying to think about, I think, like Amanda was saying, the short and the long term, what my goals were. I think short term, when I was thinking about, maybe consulting, I was like, there's a lot of business schools that probably could prepare me pretty well. But really, when I kind of, through the application, the essays, I started thinking about, okay, where do I want to see myself long term? I really saw myself intersecting between different types of sectors, which is exactly what's happened. And I thought, what would be the best positioning school for me in that space? And it was pretty clear early on for me that Yale and SOM was going to be a top choice. Obviously, especially if somebody interested in education, we have such a strong community backgrounds. We have people working literally in every space in the ed space, from higher ed to alternative ed to K-12, charter schools, et cetera, you name it, government. So that was obviously a natural bend, but I think the intersection of just the diversity of what our classmates was also interested was really interesting to me. And I think it was just a really good marriage. So first and foremost was certainly the mission and kind of the breadth of what everybody else was involved in that really kind of probably sealed the deal. There's a lot of other things too. New Haven's great. Pizza's awesome in New Haven. Community is fun. We have a great time. I like the class size, but I would definitely say what put it over the top was for sure like just thinking about like where do I want to be long term? What community aligns best with that?
Thank you so much, Bernie. And there actually that's touched on. I mean, the pizza touched on a lot of things, but so your answer kind of I could probably take it in a few different directions, but we did get a question specifically about joint degrees. I don't think any of you pursued a formal joint degree, but Bernie, your response just then touched on sort of classmates and learning from classmates. And I know if you would be able to speak to some of the experiences you had that did draw from some of the things your classmates are doing, or some of the breadth of the experiences your classmates had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we at SOM have a number of joint degrees, so although a lot of people here, a lot of our classmates were, and if you come to SOM, almost guaranteed one of your cohort mates, or definitely like your learning team, will have probably at least one joint degree. I remember, I think I had 2 or 3 between law school, School of FES, our environmental sciences school, lots of joint degrees, probably our most popular healthcare, MD, MBAs, I mean, you name it. So you'll be interacting with a ton of other joint degrees. And then I think what's, very unique to Yale, even if you're not a joint degree, a lot of, and I'm sure other panelists will agree, a lot of students take classes at other schools around campus. And I certainly took advantage of that. Both taking classes like at the law school. I took actually also classes at the School of Music, was probably my funnest class. I took a class, Jazz and History of Race in America. It was really fun. And also took a class kind of on like macroeconomics. That was actually outside of SOM. I audited that class. I didn't even take it for credit just because I was interested in the professor. So there's just lots of examples like that. I'm sure other people on the panel also have similar experiences. So you get the breadth both within your, I guess, your cohort mates or your classmates in SOM, but also access to just a ton of different coursework all around the university.
Yeah, I can compliment. I think that's actually what called, it's probably not the reason why I went, but when I was there, the reason that I most liked looking back now, I work obviously with a ton of MBAs, right? And from different schools. And we talk about experiences and they had like very traditional business classes and that's kind of like all they did, which is cool too. Like if you were thinking about doing an MBA, obviously you want to do that, and at SOM you need to do that. Like there's obviously the core curriculum which you need to do, and you're obviously going to be interested in other classes as well. But just the ability to do these classes in these other schools. Like I did a design course that we used to go to the museum where Bruce is right now every week, and then just like talk about issues and try to solve them with design thinking, which was super interesting. I'm a zero design person, so for me it was very interesting to do that. Forestry, Jackson. So a bunch of different classes, which I feel that I did an MBA. I did an MBA, but I also feel that I did a bunch of like small other degrees, or at least had that experience, which looking back now was super interesting.
Yeah, and maybe I'll yeah, just sort of to add to that, Bernie, I did not realize you took that. I literally took that exact same class in School of Music. I thought it was amazing. And also a law class, but I think an experience I had taking a class and doing work, doing a project in that, like a competition at the School of Architecture, I think is a really good example of like why it's so important to take classes outside of SOM. And that is like if you're in business school, you're obviously there's a variety of different people, but you're still you're on a similar train, right? You're a certain type of person, right? You're not an architect. You're probably not a musician. And I remember staying up at like 2 a.m. working, 3 a.m. working on this project with architecture students. And it just felt like I was in a different world just because of like their timing for, what made me think of it was the design aspect. And they were just going so deep in this project. And that type of like maybe they're not the best at time management, but they're really focused on design. They're really doing something, really bringing something unique, and sort of sitting there and gaining that perspective from like architecture students. I think it was really valuable, especially when you like post in your career where you're working with teams like different engineering teams at Apple or design teams, and you're like, oh wow, I'm really working on a project with people that have totally different priorities, and how do you manage that? How do you not get frustrated? How do you stay effective, and also make sure everyone is feeling heard as you lead a project team? So while there's a novelty aspect to it, which is really fun and interesting, there is actually also, I think, a really critical component that is a part of professional development and an education that SOM enables.
That's a really fantastic insight and example. And I'd love to broaden and see if anyone else on the panel, was there a kind of a learning, an unexpected learning or insight that you got from your time at Yale SOM? Maybe something, you're going to learn how to do sort of modeling and do spreadsheets, and you'll learn some micro and accounting. But is there some sort of particular an unexpected insight that you got, or unexpected thing that you took from the degree that maybe you still even draw from in your time at work now? Sorry, I went from the softballs to the fast pitch very quickly there.
I think I can try. Like, I think something that could sound a bit cliche, but I see it on the day-to-day is like, and Bernie touched on this about the mission. So I really think that people who graduate from SOM have a different perspective on business and trying to link it with like real impact they do. And I think part of it is because a lot of people come from a social impact background or have that interest, right? So it is a school for its history and for the fact that it was an MPPA before, attracts these kind of people. So not everyone, but like I was very surprised about the amount of people that or came from that background or were interested in that background, right? But not only that, I think in every class we have in the core curriculum and in electives as well. Obviously, I did a bunch of electives in these themes, but I know that other electives as well touch upon those themes. So like not only looking at like how to increase profitability, how to grow, and super business oriented, we're always bringing the society factor into it. And I have like a number of friends who after the MBA, 2 years later, we still talk and they say like, oh my God, it's like impressive still how today, like I work with people who did other MBAs and make decisions that are solely based on like financial metrics, right? While I feel that people from SOM always bring a social component to it, a personal perspective to it. And I think that for me was like one of the biggest insights from the MBA. And like I look at other people's experience and I hear about them, and I think like my experience was so different at SOM. And I really think that now, like today as a manager, I see how important that is and how important that human part of it is in like everything that we do so far.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. As I reflect on some of the experiences that I really appreciated in the moment and really appreciate now, it's not just what happens in the classroom, but it's also what you're doing with your classmates on campus more broadly. And some of the things that I really, really enjoyed was just, taking advantage of things that were happening on Yale's campus. Maybe that's going to a guest speaker at Jackson or at Yale College. And, you find people who are interested in similar topics. For me and for my group of friends who were really interested in politics and really wanted to talk about current events that were happening during school that related to the Yale community. And so it was really powerful to be able to go to events, hear incredible speakers, or see, activism on campus, and then be able to immediately go and talk to this group of people after the fact and reflect on our individual experiences, the implications of what that event means on campus, in our community, in the world, and be able to just slip so quickly between the impacts on business or the impacts on society, on education, on global affairs. And that was something that just felt really unique and felt like some of it was the catalyst of having these events happen on campus and having these incredible guest speakers. And some of it is also just the intentionality of the people that are there. And I think it was something, as I look back, that's often what I draw upon, is I give examples to friends who are maybe considering school, or family members that ask me what I enjoyed about school was that intentional set of conversations and really being able to think broadly about the world at large and my place in it, and what role I can take as a business person or as a society member to enact change.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Katarina. And those are sort of great examples. And actually, I had a question come in that's maybe a little more focused on sort of a related aspect, which was the curriculum. What were your experiences with the curriculum and how you're taught from multiple perspectives? So I think it's kind of a similar theme in terms of learning from different perspectives, but in specifically in the classroom. And you can feel free to expand out from that specific question, but just a little bit more about the experience with the curriculum at SOM.
I'm happy to start, and then I'm sure others will have comments to add as well. So I came from a business background. I had a business undergrad and came from a business context before school. That being said, I still really appreciated the core curriculum, and I liked the fact that it was integrated and had different perspectives. So it kind of forced me to think cross-functionally instead of just thinking about, I'm in accounting, so I'm going to think about accounting, or I'm going to think about marketing because I'm in marketing class. And so that was really valuable. Not to overly harp the social impact points, but I really love that each of our core classes had at least one case, if not more, on social impact. And I found that to be a really powerful way to break out of those just functional buckets and really think more holistically. And the curriculum is very intentional, and you kind of grow over time to some of these more inherently cross-functional or tougher topics. You might start with accounting, but at the end of the year, you're talking about entrepreneurship or state and society, which is kind of thinking about policy and the intersections of business and broader environments. And so I really appreciated that. Your core curriculum is one element of the curriculum, but then there's also many, many awesome elective classes that you can take. And so for myself and for friends that went there, my partner also went to SOM, I think there's also value that if you want to go deep, you can. So if you really want to go investigate economics and go deep in that, you can. If you're interested in social impact, you can. Entrepreneurship, whatever it is. And so I would think of the curriculum in both ways and think about your broad core curriculum and then the opportunities to go deep if you are interested in a particular topic, or if you want the smorgasbord of lots of electives, you can take a little bit of everything as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you on the call are, debating between different options. And what I'll say is, now being a few years out, I think I have more appreciation for what we were doing in the curriculum than during the moment. I think in the moment, I was like, okay, this raw case stuff is interesting. It's a little weird, pulling from a lot of different things, kind of feels a little disjointed. It's hard to kind of contextualize at times, it felt like. But post MBA, when I was in consulting, and certainly now, that's kind of what the real world's like, right? Like you don't get a 10-page case study that's like, hey, everything's in this information, everything's in this 10-page case packet. Let's do a multiple choice test, and then let's figure out the answer. As I'm sure our colleagues in consulting, where you're pulling from like various sources of information, you're looking at all different types of things, you're talking to experts, you're looking through many different perspectives to try to find the best answer, whether you're an advisor or now being on the operating side of the business. A lot of my role is kind of looking around the corner, seeing okay, what are our competitors doing? What's this? Let me look at our financials. How does this affect profitability? How does this affect what our customers are going to think? So I think the real world is a lot messier than a traditional case study. And I think what the raw case simulates, obviously there's nothing like being in the real world, but it simulates a bit more of what you'll really experience in your working world, especially as you leave as a post MBA, when you'll have traditionally a lot more scope, and especially as you get more senior in the roles, you'll have a lot more purview over a lot of different domains, some of which you may be more expert in, but some of which you won't be. And so I think having that experience where you have that kind of broad purview, or at least know how to balance different aspects, is like super, super valuable.
Thank you so much, Bernie, and thank you, Amanda, for those responses and for those insights. I want to shift gears a little bit because we talked a good bit about some aspects of the campus experience. There have been a good number of questions coming in about careers and career development, and specifically asking whether you all could talk a little bit about the degree to which the Career Development Office helped you with your summer internship, full-time post-MBA role, and how much that happened outside career services or career development office. So just a little bit more about that aspect of your SOM experience.
The CDO 100% got me my job at Apple, like completely. And that was because I engaged the CDO, the Career Development Office, pretty early on, and because I wasn't really sure. I knew I wanted to get into supply chain, and so just went to the person who was really into operations, and she just built a relationship with her. So she sort of sent me some ideas and sort of suggested one or two things for like my internship, but basically I was on her radar, and we were in communication, so that when Apple came to campus, and they were actually looking for a select group of people that I was not a part of, but she knew that I was very serious about the supply chain role, and so I was the one add-on. And the only reason she included me was because I had built that relationship, and she sort of knew that Apple was coming to campus. And sure enough, I interviewed and got a full-time job, and I've been here at Apple for 6.5 years now. And that's 100% because of the CDO. So again, like CDO, just like everybody else, they're people, and if you can sort of build relationships and understand, they'll be thinking about you. They have a great purview to the different resources and ideas, and they'll network for you even. So really emphasize the importance of the CDO in my career search.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it was the same. I actually did a very non-traditional career search as an international student looking for a role in social impact. And I did not want consulting. Like I went to the MBA saying I will not go back to consulting. And here I am 3 years later. But so I was like, no, I don't want to do consulting. I'm not going to apply to any of the big consulting firms. I'm going to do social impact. I like Emery, I built a great relationship with CDO and met with them like every week and network together. I think I talked to so many alumni, and alumni are super eager to talk to you. Like at any time, they will definitely pick up the phone and spend 15, 30, 45 minutes with you on the phone, talking about opportunities and helping you even like brainstorm. For me, it was super difficult as an international student. Very few like small companies, which are usually the company like the startups and social impact firms, hire international students. So it was a struggle. And I found my full-time job when they created the first social impact networking night. And it was a CDO initiative, which they created and brought a bunch of these companies to campus. And yeah, there I met like Chris, who was a partner from Wall Street Consulting, and got a job there. So again, 100% with CDO. That was how I got my full-time opportunity.
So one thing I would add is absolutely agree. I think, the CDO is a formal resource. There's also your alumni base, which will be incredibly helpful. The third thing that I just want to highlight is also the peers that are in your class with you or the class above you. And they often are a really great resource as well to find jobs. I will highlight two things. One is just the opportunity to get support through clubs. So for example, if you're interested in consulting, there's a really intense club that gives you a ton of support and is, supported in large part by second years who went into consulting and want to give back to first years and support them as they navigate the application process. That is the same for almost every industry, investment banking, tech, media, you name it, there's probably a club for it. And there's a very active student support network around getting jobs. For me, I was really interested in startups. And so I actually really leveraged the people in class with me who came from startups or who knew people who were in startups. Because if you're trying to get into that space, sometimes, 1 or 2 years removed and talking to alumni might not be quite the right fit. And so that was something that I found to be very helpful as well.
That's great. Thank you all so much for those answers. And I'd love to pick up your, Amanda, on your comment about classmates, because we did have a question come in. It's not career related, but just asking how much you've kept in touch with your classmates post-graduation, especially maybe cohort and learning team members. And I don't know, for those of you, if anyone wants to explain the cohort/learning team structure, that would be helpful also.
I'm happy to start with that question. So I was the cohort rep for Red, which meant that I was in the Red cohort, which is a group of about 70 students who are all put together for the core classes. Most of your first year, you're taking the same classes together. And so that group is set up before your first day. You show up and are really able to build a smaller sub community within the class of about 350 students for the MBA program. Within the cohort, as you are assigned homework and group projects and that type of thing in your core classes, you are further broken up. So that group of 70 becomes 8 or 9 learning teams, which are about 8 or 9 people within them. And then that can even be further broken up into small learning teams, which quite frankly, is most of your homework assignments, you're working with 3 or 4 other people to maybe do a problem set or something like that. It's really only larger projects that you would do with your large learning team. And so your first year, just a ton of time is being spent with that small learning team of 3 to 4 other people. Really dynamic group. You will likely not have very many other people that have similar backgrounds or similar demographics as you. And so it's a really nice way to put to the test working with people who are motivated in different ways, who come with different sets of experiences, strengths and weaknesses. And it's a great experience. I'm still super close to several members of my small learning team. As I mentioned, my partner who I actually met at SOM, he also went there. So we stay in touch with both of our small learning teams. I actually just had a trip to New York City to see a very close friend of mine from my small learning team, who was the head of the internship fund my year. And so for me, at least, especially with COVID at the end of my business school experience, we didn't get to have a graduation ceremony. We are going to have one very soon for those that were in the class of 2020. So I'm hoping to see a lot of people in person and like get that big group community back together. But I have, a set of people that we talk to all the time on Zoom and try to meet up in small groups, especially on the West Coast. There's actually a really great SOM alum community. 3 of us are on the West Coast from this panel. And so there's lots of chances to get connected to people in the class or people that graduated a little bit before us.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. And actually, I want to maybe pivot a little bit back to the career piece and maybe marry it somewhat to the your classmates in the network. But the question is specifically, especially for those who've done who've changed jobs post SOM. how has Yale and or the network influenced your career search?
I guess that might be mostly directed towards me. Absolutely. Like I said, pretty helpful, especially going into a space like education. Again, we have a lot of alumni who are in that space. So certainly when I was going through my career search, especially, I worked at Bain post MBA, and then I was looking to transition. I certainly used my multiple networks. So I used my Bain network, which was very helpful. We have a lot of Bain alumni as well in very different spaces. And so I connected with some people, but I also reached out to my SOM network, both classmates that I've had that worked in education or worked at other startups, because I was also interested in smaller companies or startups. And then other alumni who, I just reached out to at different companies. So, it's pretty easy, especially on LinkedIn these days, like kind of find people who are in different spaces. And again, like, especially in certain fields, like education, like your hit rate is pretty high that you'll find somebody that's at least affiliated with SOM or Yale. The other thing that I would say is like Yale alums in general tend to be also very open to speaking if you're just part of the broader community. So sometimes it was SOM alumni, but also just Yale alumni in general, even if they're Yale College. We're always like, oh, you went to Yale. That's great. Let's chat. And like, so kind of utilize that along the way. So it was definitely super helpful as I was evaluating like what spaces I want to enter, both using, my SOM network, but also my Bain alumni network.
I think I changed jobs too, right? Oh, sorry, Emery, you want to go?
No, I was just gonna say quickly, I did not change jobs, but I've been on the receiving end and sort of actually helped people mid-career, like post SOM, join Apple after a couple of years in another role. So I've been on the receiving end and helped bring people in.
Yeah, I changed, but for me, I think for me, I went to McKinsey, right? So like, it's obviously a much more traditional recruiting pathway. So I wouldn't say I leverage it that much. But I was gonna comment what Emery said, like, and they're now being 2 years in, like I receive like people want to talk all the time and talk to people and try to bring people. Actually, just brought a Yale person to the São Paulo office, which was super cool. We are very few in São Paulo yet, in Brazil yet, unfortunately. But hopefully we can get those numbers up soon.
We'll work on that. That'd be good to do. I would actually like to sort of broaden the alumni question beyond just sort of the professional search, and just there was a question that came in more generally, like how has your experience been as a Yale SOM alum, and maybe some of the ways in which you've engaged with the alumni network. And obviously the pandemic, as we know, has seriously altered that, but either things that you've been able to continue during the pandemic or things that happened before that you hope will return. Just like to get a little bit more sense of the alumni experience more generally.
You could kick off. I'm sure everybody is different. I mean, I think, SOM tries to do a pretty good job of kind of keeping us connected. So, I mean, one obvious one is like reunions. So when you graduate, you'll have class reunions. So some schools, it's like they do every 5 years. SOM actually has a 1-year reunion. So I know that also probably got messed up in COVID a little bit, but I was fortunate enough pre-COVID to get into my 1-year reunion, which was a lot of fun. And my 5-year is coming up next year, which is really wild. So I'm looking forward to heading back to New Haven for that. So that's like a good way for like you kind of reconnect, obviously, with your classmates who are now spread out around the world, and like in smaller areas, similar, like there's a lot of pockets. So I'm in the Bay Area, like Emery, and like there's a lot of people that, obviously there's classmates I know and other fellows, and I link up with other classes too. It's not just your own classes. So me and Emery have common mutual friends. We've hung out in Oakland, even though we're a couple of years apart in business school. So you'll find, I think, within each, like especially major city, there's obviously an alumni network and people tap into things. I also typically, again, pre-COVID, used to go to like alumni events when Bruce came to town to San Francisco. I would kind of pop in and try to say hi, connect with other people, and just kind of try to give back as well. It's always nice to be on the other end, because I remember what it was like being on the other side. So I try to also give back. That's also a good way to always keep connected to the community.
I completely agree with all of that. The one thing I would add is I've really enjoyed connecting to SOM alum within my company. And so I think for a lot of big organizations, you'll see that there'll be kind of informal affinity groups or alumni networks within the firm that you work with. So Bernie and I actually overlap ever so slightly at Bain. And, I love talking to people who are actually going to school, who have gotten accepted into SOM and are thinking about, the move to New Haven, and getting to talk about that with future alums, or to talk to people who have joined the firm. And it's something I think a lot of times it's nice to just have someone that you can ask, that they're not working directly with you, but they're just someone that you can, ask a silly question, or just connect and have a place to vent. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed, of just being a part of that network as well.
Oh, Emery, did you have?
Yeah, maybe I'll just, to add in, like Bernie said, like, I mean, a lot of my closest friends, several years out, are from SOM. Go to SOM weddings is very, very common, even 6 years out, still going to those SOM weddings cross country. So yeah, it's a really strong community of friends, and just even on a social level. And then in terms of like engagement with Bruce and the admissions folks, they're always organizing things, events. Obviously this is like pre-COVID, but I always felt like there's at least like maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months, like an actual in-person event, just to socialize with alumni or with prospective students. That's just fascinating. One, because you sort of connect with maybe alums who you like, but maybe you just don't like have time to see everybody you want to see, and it's a great time to sort of interact with those alums, but then also talk to y'all. It's something I really enjoy, and it's fun to sort of say like, okay, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was in this process, what was I interested in? And hearing from everyone who's thinking about SOM or just business school more generally, it's really fascinating, and so it feels really good to be part of this this narrative, or this timeline of SOM as we grow. So it's really constant communication, and I mean, we're here right now. So thanks, Bruce and team.
Oh, thank you all. It's always great to see you. And it's tough. I know, Brent, I do remember, catching up in San Francisco. It's tough not to have been able to do that, and sort of being sort of Bay Area, Sao Paulo, or Seattle, wherever. But hopefully that will resume sometime soon. I want to switch gears a little bit. We have a little time left, and this is a history question, maybe more of advice for those attendees for their time at business school. But the question is whether anyone could speak to what's described as the delicate balance between active engagement with coursework, networking with peers and professors, clubs and activities, and recruiting opportunities. There's a lot you have to balance, and any advice, any strategies anyone can offer, I'm sure would be very, very welcomed.
My advice is you're probably going to get it wrong, and that's okay. I think people like to kind of like, how do I balance this? Like, how do I get this perfectly right? And even for, business school tends to attract somewhat type A people who are like super organizers, planners. And I think even the best planners, at some point you're going to get hit in the face and you're kind of overwhelmed by the situation, especially in your first semester. I certainly was. You kind of like talk to a bunch of people like, yeah, I kind of know what to expect. It's going to be fine. I can balance this. I'll do this. I'll figure this out. And, at a certain point you might be running and then you're like, I got way too much on my plate. I'm signed up for 10 clubs. I'm going to every event every night. I'm also trying to, go to Gypsy every other night and hang out at the bar. And something has to give at some point. So I think some of it was just like, accept that it's going to probably happen. And also it's part of the experience. And I think something that you'll learn over time is how you prioritize your time. And I think something that's pretty valuable about business school is that like you are presented with an overabundance of opportunities, and there's no possible way you can do everything. So you pretty quickly realize, either through trial and error, like myself, or maybe you're more strategic, that you're not going to be able to get through everything. So you learn to figure out what is going to make what's going to work for you, what's valuable. And in certain moments, certain things were more valuable. So sometimes, first semester, I had to spend more time in the curriculum. It's a lot of work. Like, it's pretty intensive. Second year, second semester, a little bit less, maybe on the academic side, more time on clubs, connecting with my classmates, doing travel. So, it balances out. It's not a one formula for every person as well. But I actually think that's one of the most valuable things I learned in business school. It's just like, because again, after business school, your time also becomes bombarded. You're at work, you have way too many things to do. So learning how to prioritize your time is a constant skill that I'm still working on, but it's good to learn how to do it while you're in a kind of a safe setting.
That was a great answer. Thank you. I don't know how much there is to add. One thing I would actually say, and not to sort of insert myself, but I can't remember what faculty member meant this. I've said this before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, and I've said in other contexts. But there was a professor who said to me at one point, which I thought would resonate, because I still remember, business school is like a hot air balloon. It's what you throw out that allows you to rise. And I think that's really, it's really tough. It's, you are, to your point, Bernie, it's sometimes trial and error, sometimes more strategic, but you're learning how to prioritize, learning how to say no. I think that's a key skill, and you kind of learn. It is nice thing about business school generally is it is a safe space. You can fail, and you can try something and fail, learn how to fail, learn how to pick yourself up and try again. And I think it's great to be able to stretch yourself and learn those skills at a place where the cost of failure is that much lower, and you, as opposed to afterwards, and when it's the stakes do increase. Sorry, so busy talking that I didn't actually have a question lined up.
I could kind of build off that though, Bruce, because one thing that I heard many people kind of say and encourage themselves to remember throughout the business school experience is that your experience is your own, and you should really focus on what you want to get out of school, whether that be academics or networking and recruiting or putting yourself outside your comfort zone or whatever that might be. And remember that it's your experience, and to not just follow the well-beaten path. And I think, often that comes up as, I'm not sure I want to recruit for consulting or iBanking, but everyone else is doing it, so maybe I should do it too. And I think that type of confusion or like not trusting yourself is often where you get really overwhelmed, right? But if I really am interested in these classes or these events or these student organizations, and that's what I'm going to put my time and energy towards, you're probably still going to have some craziness and need to learn the hard way to an extent, but it makes life a little bit easier. And so that's a piece of advice that I would give for, of course, you're going to overinvest in something and be really tired, and on a Wednesday night be like, oh my gosh, I have 7 things to go to, and it's all at the same time. But if you're able to kind of reflect on what matters to you and what you want to get out of the experience, it'll help you learn to prioritize and take that skill forward.
I think related to that is also like trying to do things that you're curious about, but you've never done before. So it's a great, everyone said here is a time that like it's very low stakes because it's a business school. You're not working, and you don't have that pressure. So exploring things that were curious about but didn't know what to do. So everyone is very like concerned about your internship. Look, I need to get an internship that will be my full-time job and will be my dream job forever. And that's like, I would say, like, do not do that. Like, do an internship on something that you're like maybe you don't even like something you're like a little bit curious about, but maybe it's not even what you think you want to do, but just try it out. Like, I don't know the stats, Bruce, probably like 50% people continue internship, like do their full-time in their internship, or maybe even less. So like, it's super normal to try it out. And I'm going to say the same thing for full-time. People are so concerned about their full-time offer. And like at the end of the day, some people change jobs afterwards. I think Emery is the first person I've known that's graduated 6 years ago and is in the same company. I think 80% of my classmates have changed jobs already, and it's okay. And like, it happens. So don't get so concerned about the job, your full-time opportunity, your internship, and try to try out different things, because I'm sure you'll get a lot from that experience. And at the end of the day, you have a great degree and you met great people, and you'll find something that you want to do.
I'm gonna insert myself again. I apologize. I guess we're getting on in time. I'm kind of loosening up with it. But that reminded me of something that, it's not on the job front, but on the academic front, that I can't tell you how many times I've talked to students who are interested in the social sector or going into the nonprofit, or did that and graduated. And I said, well, what was the most helpful course for you, or the most interesting course, the most useful course for you at SOM? And thinking they're going to mention, a nonprofit management course, or global social enterprise or something like that, and they say accounting. That's the most important thing, because that's the thing I needed the most. That was a gap I needed to fill. That's the thing I needed the most help with, and wasn't what I was going to get exposure to in my job or professionally. And that's where that's where SOM added the most value. And so Katarina, sort of similar, in terms of the internship, don't just, it's not just about getting that internship to get the full-time job, but explore and take advantage of the opportunity to do that. I think that's great advice. Want to shift gears a little bit again. I know we have a couple more minutes. And we talked a little bit about joint degrees and, exploring the campus and sort of the music class that apparently everyone's taken. But one question was, other ways in which you've engaged with sort of the centers and institutes across the campus, Sci-City and others. And I don't know if any of you did that, but if any, CBay or others, if there are any examples of sort of working with centers across campus, that was a question that came in.
I was a Sci-City Center advisor for 1 year. It was amazing. I loved it so much. We basically, it's like an incubator for startups. And the advisors, they work one-on-one for 1 semester with the founders. And it's really, really cool. First of all, you have an exposure to people from all over, right? From different graduate degrees mostly, which are the advisors. And the founders are from all over Yale. So undergrads, graduates, a bunch of interesting people come to talk, and from the market. So it's New Haven, super close to New York, right? So every week somebody from like a large company that was once a startup came to talk to the founders, and we were super involved. We did a trip to New York to visit a bunch of growing startups. So it was super, super interesting. I think it was one of the best things I did in Yale for sure. And I really, really, really loved my experience there. And I think from in the beginning, when I applied, I was like, oh, but I don't know anything about startups. Like, why am I going to be an advisor, right? And the feedback that I got from the founders I worked with was like, it's just so good to have somebody to talk to that, is like an unbiased person who's just there to listen to you. And I found that they said that what they most needed sometimes in this process of starting something was just to talk it out with someone and have somebody to help them think through the problem. So it was a super valuable experience for me and for them as well, I think.
Great. Oh, sorry, Amanda.
Participate in it, but my roommate actually was a founder and ended up taking 6 months off to pursue her startup full time, and now is actually pursuing it post graduation. And so I think also to highlight for those that are interested in entrepreneurship, there's just a ton of resources through SOM and also through broader Yale. I think Sci-City is a center that supports all of Yale. So lots and lots of resources, and I think it's a really close-knit community within SOM for people that are interested in pursuing that and learning all the tips and tricks of where to go to get support.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Thank you, Katarina, for those responses. Did actually questions so broadening outside the Yale campus? I know Bernie touched on pizza, and then there was a question actually asking whether the location of Yale influenced your decision to attend, and can you talk more a little bit about the living in the area? And I think, Bernie, you actually expounded a little bit beyond that, but any other thoughts about sort of the, not just Yale, but then sort of New Haven and sort of the, maybe even being in the Northeast corridor?
New Haven's, I would call it the unkept secret of the Northeast, but and no, seriously, so I had spent 10 years before, almost 10 years. I went to NYU undergrad, spent a lot of time in New York City, which obviously is a mega city. Awesome. I love New York. But for me, I thought New Haven's actually a really good balance between, city life, but not New York, right? As New York's like a lot for many people, but also getting to be in a place that's a little bit smaller where you actually get to know your classmates. And so for me, that was actually, it was like a little bit of best of both worlds. So for those you don't know, New Haven's almost in between a little bit New York and Boston. So you have two major cities, obviously mega cities that are train ride away, literally like less than 2 hours, which is awesome. So if you need to go to the city for whatever reason, recruiting or fun, social, etc. And having been in New York, I thought I was going to be in New York all the time in business school. What I actually found was I rarely went to New York besides like recruiting or obviously to see friends every once in a while, because there's a ton to do in New Haven. So, besides obviously campus life and everything else, the downtown New Haven has tons of restaurants, bars, both on campus, off campus, that are really, really good. Obviously, pizza, I will say it again, is awesome. So, that is the thing if you're interested in pizza. But no, like culturally, also, East Rock is great. Lots of parks. Museums are really cool. So it has a little bit of everything without being kind of overwhelming, is how I kind of phrase it to friends. So I think for a grad school experience is awesome because, again, like most of my classmates live within 1 square mile of me. So getting to meet people or meeting people after class instead of like being, again, I was at NYU, going all the way uptown to Harlem, and you're in Brooklyn, is a very different thing. It's like, oh, I'm in East Rock and you're in downtown. So it's a very different thing to meet up. So it makes it much easier to socialize and do other things with your classmates in New Haven. So I thought it brought a little bit of best of both worlds.
Yeah, just to add on, I agree with everything Bernie said. It really was, I didn't realize how perfect of a place it is to go to grad school. And especially looking at some competitor schools, right? You don't want to be so isolated where you kind of go stir crazy, right? There's enough going on, right? That you're entertained, but then also like talking to some other friends who went to some larger schools like in New York and others, they kind of felt like they got lost and didn't really have a sense of community, because if you're in the city or in a big place, like everyone already has their friend group. It's harder to sort of connect with people. And so that New Haven really is like splits that nice difference of there's enough going on where you're sort of entertained, but it's not too big. So there is still this sort of, community aspect to it. But then also like every other weekend or every month, whatever that makes sense. It's so easy to go to New York, especially if you're doing international trips or things like that. You need to pop into JFK or Newark, very easy. Or New Haven Airport, actually, now that I think about it. So again, location was just prime for a graduate school experience, and I love New Haven, and I love my time there.
I think to complement really quickly, I agree. And I visit a bunch of schools, and as an international student, many people want to live in big cities, want to live in New York, want to live in Chicago. And I visited schools, and I felt like I nowhere I felt the connection I felt between students as I did in Yale when I visited. And again, talking to my friends who did other schools, I feel that. And I think the fact that everyone is most, like 99% of people are in New Haven for the same reason. They are there to go to school. Really helps create the connection, right? Versus New York, where people already live there and are so they have a bunch of other friends outside of school, right? And for me, I think that aspect made it super quick to connect to people and make friends, and like in an already challenging experience, like that aspect makes it much easier.
That's wonderful. Thank you all. We're just about at time. We have maybe a minute left. And so I'd like to ask one last question. I apologize for we got to as many questions as we could. There are a lot more. And so if you didn't have your question answered, please feel free to email us at mba.admissions@yale.edu, and we'll try to get you the information. But as the last question, I would just love it if you could each maybe just briefly give if you have any advice for candidates preparing to apply to Yale SOM. It wasn't too long ago when you were in their shoes. Any thoughts about the process, or one little piece of advice for how they should sort of navigate things?
I can start quickly. I would just really encourage you to think about what your story is and try not to write the right story of what you think will get you in. I was an admissions interviewer, and so was able to talk to people and help them through their application process. And the thing that stuck out the most was when a student, sorry, that was my dog's dog food. He just danced in the background. But the thing that really stuck out the most was, when students were really passionate about why they wanted to go to school and why they knew that SOM was the right fit for a variety of reasons. And so that is what I would encourage you all to think through and bring that passion and that energy, and it will shine through in your application.
Sound like broken record, but my biggest tip is, again, to think about not just your immediate post MBA goal, but really as you're really crafting your story, thinking about like, where do you see yourself long term and what school you feel like best aligns with your values. I think that's something that's overlooked. Sometimes you really get focused on like, I need this consulting job, and what school has like 30 people that went to McKinsey versus 25. And it's probably not the right way to optimize your decision. So you want to really be thoughtful about, great, of course, your short-term goal is important, but where do you see yourself long-term? What kind of sectors, what kind of people do you want to be around? And does that school actually reflect that value for you? Because this is, for most people, a terminal degree. And you want to be confident that not just in the first couple of years, but 10, 20, 30 years later, you feel good about your decision of where you went.
I really love that, Bernie. Yeah, and I would just say, yeah, be authentic. And there's a lot of really good schools out there, and you will get into one, and it will be the right one for you. So again, be authentic, be yourself, and you'll connect. You'll make that right connection.
I think they said everything. I think it's exactly that. Just like as a tip, learn a lot about the school, right? I think attending these events, but talking to people outside and connecting to people who are there, other alumni, I think showing that you've learned a lot and then making the informed decision that you actually want to go to that school because of the culture, because of what it offers you. Well, if the more you talk to people, the more you know that, right? So I think doing the homework is super important.
Great. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. And I think everyone's doing that by being on the session, and hopefully we'll continue to reach out and learn more. We're happy to engage and help provide whatever information you need. I want to thank the alumni, Katarina, Emery, Bernie, Amanda. Thank you so much for a wonderful session, and really appreciate all the information, the valuable insights that you've provided. And thank you all the attendees for being part of the session. Hopefully it's been helpful. We look forward to seeing your application, hopefully at some point, whether it's in the January 6th deadline coming up or somewhere down the road. Best of luck with the process. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful night or good day if it's the morning for you.
Thank you, guys.